All right, welcome back to part 2 of Unkindness from the Fish's Mouth, where I'll be going over chapter 3 and chapter 4. First, we start with chapter 3, The Jupiter Return as Spectacular, Preordained Failure, by the Piscean Syndicate. Epigraph. Jupiter does not bring luck, it brings scope. It is the universe offering you a larger arena in which to stage your most characteristic catastrophe. Pray for a modest chart. From the Syndicate's log of inflated disasters. We arrive now at the great gaseous bonfire of the zodiac, Jupiter, the planet of expansion, benevolence, and fortune, the cosmic congratulation, the pat on the back that knocks you into the path of an oncoming bus. We are conditioned to await its return, that approximate 12-year cycle when Jupiter comes home to its natal place with the greed of a lottery ticket holder. We expect promotion, abundance, a sudden widening of the road. This is a child's understanding. The mature view, the syndicate's view, is that the Jupiter return merely provides you with the exact quantity of rope, the precise dimensions of stage, and the most flattering lighting in which to hang yourself according to your deepest, most inherent nature. Consider Arthur Finch, a man whose natal Jupiter in Sagittarius, nestled in his 10th house of career and public standing, had previously manifested as a cheerful, if unremarkable, trajectory. Manager of a mid-level philanthropic foundation, host of adequate dinner parties, wearer of reliably patterned socks. His Jupiter was benign, undemanding. It asked only for a little philosophical banter at the water cooler and the occasional trip to a wine region. He was, in essence, a friendly minor footnote. Then his return approached. Transiting Jupiter began its slow, inevitable conjugation with his natal Jupiter. The universe prepared his arena. The opportunity that presented itself was so perfectly tailored it felt like destiny. And apparently I did not finish that. Wow, that's embarrassing. Pretty sure the other ones are complete. Yeah, the other ones are complete. Just not chapter 3. Holy shit. Chapter 4, we'll just go with that. Of fixed stars and fixed ideas, the algorithm of grief. If anyone wants to add on to these too, that's okay. Of fixed stars and fixed ideas, the algorithm of grief. The fixed stars do not influence, they testify. They are the silent, burning witnesses to the script we have already agreed to perform. To be conjunct one is to have your life's theme written in letters of eternal fire. From the Syndicate's star-charted autopsies. We ascend now from the blundering planets to the colder, more distant theater, the fixed stars. These are not players in our drama, they are the critics in the highest balcony. Their light a verdict that took millennia to arrive. Among them, few hold a reputation so potently malign as Algol, the demon star in the constellation of Perseus, Medusa's winking eye. Astrological tradition whispers of beheadings, of rages that sever, of a brilliance that reveals a truth too terrible to bear with sanity. Our subject is not a king or a warrior, but a woman named Sylvia Voss, whose life was a monument to rational order. A lead data architect for a genomics firm, she believed the universe was a sublime, solvable equation. Her personal religion was a pattern recognition. Her natal chart, which she would have dismissed as pre-scientific narrative sludge, held a single icy grenade. Her sun, the core of her identity at 26 degrees Taurus, conjunct Algol within a single arc minute, a perfect terrifying fusion, the fixed star of severed heads fused with her fundamental light. For 44 years, this configuration slept. It expressed itself in harmless ways, a cutting clarity in her logic that could dismantle a colleague's flawed thesis in 3 sentences, a preference for brutalist architecture, a habit of pruning friendships that became inefficient. She saw these as virtues. They were simply Algol waiting. The trigger was not a betrayal or a violence, but an absence. Her partner, Leo, a cellist whose life was a composition of emotional acoustics and charming disorder, died. Not dramatically, in aortic dissection during a morning shower. A sudden, total systems failure in the body of a man who lived in melodic phrases. There was no pattern to find, no causal logic. It was a random deletion from the data set of her life. Sylvia's Terraean nature demanded stability. Her algol-infused sun demanded a truth she could face, even a horrific one. Grief, as commonly understood, a messy, weeping, organic process, was an algorithm she couldn't parse. It was noise. So she did the only thing she knew. She applied pattern recognition. Leo's physicality was gone, but his digital and analytical footprints were vast. A decade of shared cloud storage, his browsing history, she knew his passwords, efficiency demanded it, his practice logs where he digitally notated his sessions, his sprawling, chaotic budget spreadsheet, a document she'd often teased him for, where emotional spending was a legitimate category. She began methodically, holy shit, English, to mine the data. Hopefully you guys are able to just watch this video and read through it with me and not just listen to it, but I'll have to re-record for an actual audiobook. This was not memorialization. It was forensic investigation. She wrote scripts to analyze the tempo fluctuations in his practice logs, correlating them with his calendar entries. Did he play more rubato before a performance? Did his browsing shift towards existential philosophy in the autumn? She fed 7 years of their joint credit card statements into a visualization program, seeking the hidden rhythm of their life together in the spikes of grocery spending and the dips in utility bills. Her colleagues noticed a new fervor in her work, a pet project, she called it, behavioral prediction modeling. The dark humor, exquisitely bleak, was in the transposition. She was using the tools built to sequence genomes and predict protein folds to try and sequence the ghost of a man who once forgot his own keys 3 times a week. Algo's truth began to surface. It was not a ghost in the machine, it was a pattern of the machine, her own mind. The clues she found were Rorschach blots of her own need. A cluster of purchases at a garden center in April became a sign he'd been planning a surprise for her. A week of listening to Mahler's Kinder to 10 Lieder and his logs became a presentiment she should have heeded. The data was neutral. Her algo-lit consciousness was desperate to behead the randomness of his death, to sever it from chaos and impose a narrative line, however terrifying. The climax arrived not in a seance, but in a spreadsheet. Leo's infamous budget. He had a tab named Sylvia's Smiles, where he'd log small, frivolous things he'd done that he thought would please her. A pricey imported cheese, a donation to a sea otter rescue. It was sentimental, useless. She never looked at it. Now she ran her algorithms on it. She created a formula to assign a predicted smile yield to each entry based on costs, timing, and her own calendar stress load at that period. She graphed it. The trend line was inconclusive. The data was messy. But then she saw it, a single outlier. 6 months before his death, an entry. Donation to the city for the replanting of a lightning-struck oak in the park. $500. She loves that tree. The predicted smile yield was off the charts, but she had no memory of it. He hadn't told her. The tree stood whole and unremarkable in the park. She went to the park. She found the tree. There was no plaque, no sign of replanting. The city forestry department had no record of the donation. She stood before the oak, a solid terrain fact, and the algal truth detonated, silent and cold. The entry was a fiction, a line in a spreadsheet for a future that never came, a kindness planned and never executed, a phantom limb of an intention was the perfect, terrible pattern. The evidence of love was not in the data, but in the error, in the beautiful, useless, unsentimental lie he'd told no one but a cell in a grid. The realization did not break her, it fixed her, beheaded her old faith. The pattern she sought was not in his data, but in the very structure of her search. The universe was not an equation to be solved, it was a tree. Lightning struck her whole, indifferent to her formulas. Her grief was not a problem to be debugged. It was the eternal, algo-conjunct sun truth of her life. She could only perceive love through the lens of a devastating, clarifying analysis that ultimately left her alone with the evidence of its beautiful, failed manifestations. She did not delete the spreadsheet. She keeps them running on a server. The algorithms churn, producing their endless, meaningless correlations. She looks at them sometimes not for answers, but as a monument to her own spectacular star-born failure. She has come to understand the algo conjunction not as a curse, but as a diagnosis. She will always try to sever the head of the monster, chaos, only to find the weapon in her hand is merely a measuring stick, and the monster was never there at all. The fixed stars do not change our fate. They are the unchanging backdrop against which we finally, and with perfect terrible clarity, see the shape of our own madness. Sylvia's madness was a search for a signal in the static. She found it. The signal was the static, and now she can finally hear the music. Algol does not bring the tragedy, it brings the lens that makes the tragedy inevitable, crystalline, and perversely beautiful. To be conjuncted is to have one's life become a perfectly conducted autopsy, where the subject on the table is always, eventually, oneself. Chapter 5. We have the Piscean Syndicate's Guide to Not Drowning. Of course, by the Piscean Syndicate, and here's a confession. Epigraph. Pisces is not a sign, it is a solvent. We who are born of it do not have personalities, we have coastlines. The tide is always coming in, recovered from a waterlogged notebook, brandy stains obscuring the house placements. And so we turn the lens, that cursed crystalline device, upon ourselves. A final reflexive act of cosmic hygiene. You have endured our dissections of moons, Venuses, Jupiters, and fixed stars. You may fairly ask, who are the surgeons? What malignant alignment, what festering stellium births the impulse to chart another's sorrow with such geometer's delight? The answer is written in water. In the shifting margins where the ego dissolves, we are all three born under the sign of the fishes. Our suns swim in that mutable, empathic, hopelessly porous element. Our ascendants vary, our moons differ, but our collective psychic skeleton, our syndicate's charter, is built from a shared punishing dominance of Pisces in the 12th house. We are not wise, we are haunted. Our expertise is in the taxonomy of hauntings. This book, this entire endeavor, is not a product of clarity. It is the elaborate gilded bilge pump of a ship that is perpetually mystically taking on water. Consider our biographer. The one you imagine scribbling in the corner. Call her Ilera. Her chart, Sun and Mercury and Pisces in the 12th house, conjunct Neptune. To call her impressionable would be to call the ocean damp. She experiences the collective unconscious not as a concept, but as a constant low-grade auditory hallucination, a tinnitus of the soul. She wrote Chapter 2, Venus and Scorpio, after a single visit to a minimalist boutique, where she had to leave abruptly, nauseated not by the price tags, but by the silent scream of the unpaid artisans and the raw concrete. She doesn't research subjects, she becomes contagiously, temporarily obsessed with them. Her process is a controlled drowning in another's chart, from which she must be pulled, sputtering and quoting their childhood memories as her own. The editor who sharpens Ilera's weeping sentences into scalpels, that is Mora. Pisces sun, yes, but with Saturn rising in Scorpio, and Mars in Capricorn, squaring her natal Neptune. She is the dam, the levee, the bureaucrat of the abyss. Her 12th house is occupied by Pluto, and she administers its secrets with tyrannical efficiency. She's the one who takes Ilera's 10 pages on the sadness of Venetian plaster and distills it to the wall finish embodied a centuries-old grief for moisture. Her humor is the driest because she stands on the seafloor, enforcing structural integrity against the crushing pressure. She wrote the Jupiter return chapter as a cautionary tale to herself, having once, during her own return, tried to expand her spiritual practice by investing her savings in a cryptocurrency called Soul Chain. The loss was financial, the punchline moral. In The Archivist, the one who provides the obscure fixed star lore, the forgotten house meanings, that is Thalassa, Pisces stellium spanning the 8th and 9th houses. Her 12th house holds the south node, Ketu, of the moon, the karmic dumpster. She is our dredge. She finds the patterns in the sediment. She is the one who, after a single glance at Sylvia Voss's birth data, murmured, "Check for algal," before even knowing about the death. She knows because she swims in that past life silt. She smells the fixed stars. Her contribution is the vertigo of depth. She is the reason of our footnotes feel like something brushing against your leg in dark water. You see, the dark humor is not a stylistic choice. It is a physiological necessity. When you are cosmically wired to feel the phantom pain of every stranger's Venusian wound, when the despair of a badly aspected 4th house in a subject you've never met can ruin your afternoon, you have two options. Become a weeping saint, or become a precise and pitiless comedian. We choose the latter. Laughter is the gulp of air before the next wave. Precision, the exact degree, the minute of arc. The correct Hellenistic term is our life raft. If we can define the exact dimensions of the prison, we are for a moment not drowning within it, but floating above it, taking notes. This book is our exorcism by cataloging. We take the inchoate suffocating fog of human feeling, Pisces, and the specific ancestral curses, 12th house, that plague us all, and we pin them to the page like terrible, beautiful butterflies. We give the formless a form. We give the nameless ache a name, like Aries, Mars squaring Cancer Moon from the 12th. It doesn't cure the ache, but it makes it legible, and there's a savage, desperate comfort in that. Why do we do this for you? A final, selfish, Piscean paradox. We are the most porous of signs. The barrier between self and other is for us theoretical. In mapping your sorrows with such vicious accuracy, we are in fact charting the tides of your own. Your Martin Ellery with his feral moon, that is Illyra's own mother issue filtered through 3 layers of astrological technique and scotch. Your Arthur Finch and a spectacular Jupiter, that is Mora's humiliating memory of Soul Chain, dressed in another man's suit. We are not writing about you, we are writing about us through you. The most profound empathy and the most profound narcissism are, in our practice, the same fish swimming in a circle. So here is our guide to not drowning, the only one we've ever found. Learn the language of the water, know your chart, know its every rock and undertow. The unknown sea will kill you, the known sea is a terrible but familiar bath. Build your raft. Craft is everything, a well-turned sentence, a perfectly interpreted minor aspect, a joke so dark it absorbs the light around it. This is your flotation device. Admit you are already wet. The goal is not dryness. The goal is to stay afloat while saturated, to feel everything but to keep writing anyway. Point out the absurdity of other sailors. It is the purest charity. The tide is always coming in. Our charts guarantee it. So, our charts guarantee it. This volume, this collection of bitter, sparkling pills is the proof we are still against all celestial odds bailing. And as long as we are bailing, we are not fully dissolved. We remain against the pull of the collective, against the lure of the deep, 3 distinct, sharp-tongued, and temporarily buoyant women. For now. Pisces rules the feet. A fitting irony. The sign of the ocean is also the sign of how we navigate the ground that contains it. We walk the shoreline, forever tracing the place where the solid and the dissolved meet. Our work is the footprint we leave in the wet sand. It is detailed, it is ours, and it is already being erased. So, chapter 6. This is Saturn in the 7th, the masonry of us. Epigraph. Saturn does not deny you love. He is the architect. He simply ensures the foundation is made of regret. The walls are load-bearing resentments, and the only window looks out onto a very small, very well-kept yard. From the Syndicate's Blueprints for Solitude. We come now to the great malefic's most exquisite torture chamber, the 7th house. The domain of the other, of partners, open enemies, and the binding legalities of the heart. Here we do not seek the feral moon or the showy Jupiter. We meet Saturn, the planet of time, limit, structure, and solemn duty. In the house of you and I, Saturn is the contract, the prenuptial agreement written in a stone before the first kiss. It is the placement of the relationship as edifice, not organism. A cathedral built over a fault line, admired for its endurance, not its joy. Our specimen is the marriage of Julian and Camille Ross Wright. Not a marriage of passion nor of convenience, but of architecture. They met in a graduate program for urban planning. Their first conversation was a spirited debate about the ethical implications of zoning bylaws. Saturn in his dusty robes presided over the meeting of their eyes. Julian's Saturn and Gemini occupied Camille's 7th house. Camille's Saturn and Virgo occupied Julian's 7th. A mutual karmic sentence, a double indictment. Their courtship was a feasibility study. Their engagement, a merger ratified after a thorough review of one another's credit scores, 5-year plans, and dental histories. The wedding was not a celebration, but a groundbreaking ceremony. The officiant might as well have worn a hard hat. Their love language was improvement, not of each other's souls, but of each other's systems. Julian, Sun in Virgo, will leave a neatly printed article on the efficiency of the Swedish death cleaning method on Camille's pillow. Camille, Moon in Capricorn, would gift Julian a subscription to a time-tracking app for his birthday to help optimize your personal bandwidth. Their home was a showroom for responsible living, furniture from ethical sources, a compost system of Byzantine complexity, a shared calendar so meticulously synchronized it could give a NASA launch director an inferiority complex. The dark humor, and Saturn's humor is always dark, always dry, lay in the precision of their mutual confinement. They had not built a prison for each other, they had jointly commissioned it. They were wardens and inmates in a facility of their own impeccable design. Their Saturnine conflict arose not from betrayal, but from a deviation in structural philosophy. Began with the sofa. Their existing one, a modular gray hemp blend unit, had reached the end of its calculated lifespan. Julian proposed a replacement in ergonomically advanced, sustainably harvested teak frame with interchangeable and machine-washable cushions. He presented a spreadsheet comparing life cycle costs, carbon footprints, and peer-reviewed studies on lumbar support. Camille, however, had been visited by a phantom, a whisper from Saturn's shadow realm, the realm of aesthetics, not just utility. She had seen a photograph of a vintage, plum-colored velvet Chesterfield. It was objectively impractical. It would stain. It would require professional cleaning. Its springs would eventually sigh with defeat. She wanted it. This was not a disagreement. It was a heresy. It was a crack in the foundation of their shared Saturnine doctrine. Julian was aghast. It's unsound, he pleaded, the word echoing in the seventh house like a gavel. It's a liability, the maintenance schedule alone. I am aware of the maintenance schedule, Camille replied, her voice cool, measuring the crack. I have drafted a preliminary care plan. The sofa became the Berlin Wall of their living room. Weeks passed. The gray hemp unit remained, a monument to the stalemate. They ate their meticulously planned meals on either side of it, discussing a municipal waste management with polite, icy detachment. Their Saturn activated turned their partnership into a cold war of protocols. He began washing his dishes immediately after use, a silent critique of her habit of letting them soak, a chaotic, watery practice she associated with her Pisces mother. She retaliated by color-coding the shared calendar with a new, overly complex system he couldn't decipher without a legend. The seventh house Saturn lesson is this. The partner is not the enemy. The partner is the cosigner of your sentence. The enemy is the part of yourself you agreed to annihilate in the treaty. Camille's desire for the impractical Chesterfield was a tiny velvet rebellion of her suppressed Venus. Julian's terror of it was his Mars, bound and gagged by his own need for order. They were not fighting each other, they were fighting the ghosts of their own surrendered whims in the body of the other. The climax was one of supreme Saturnine banality. It occurred during their quarterly relationship efficiency review, a practice they had instituted during happier, more delusional times. They were discussing chore allocation variance. The data suggests, Julian said, consulting his tablet, a 22% increase in time to completion for garden maintenance tasks on your allocated weekends. The hedge trimming in particular is irregular. Camille looked at him. She looked at the tablet. She looked at the perfectly trimmed hedge. Visible through the window, a green wall of mute conformity. She thought of the plum velvet sofa, a fantasy of lush, irresponsible decay. She thought of the next 30 years of quarterly reviews. She did not yell. Saturn does not yell. Saturn states a fact. I don't want to optimize the hedge trimming, Julian, she said. I don't think I ever did. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of the sound of settling stone. It was the sound of an edifice realizing it was built on a single, fatal compromise, the belief that a shared life is a project to be managed rather than a mystery to be endured together or apart. They are still married. Saturn sees to that. The contracts, the finances, the social scaffolding. It is all too sound, too interlocked, to dismantle without unthinkable costs. The gray sofa remains. The Chesterfield was never purchased. But something has changed. They have, in their own way, reached a Saturnine accord. They have granted one another territorial concessions. Julian has his study, a sterile temple of optimization. Camille has a corner of the garden she is allowed to let grow irregular. They speak less, but with more honesty. They have accepted the limits. They have looked at the small, well-kept yard of their marriage and agreed, without sentiment, that it is enough. It is what they built. It will stand. Saturn in the 7th does not promise happiness. It promises endurance. It is the grain of the wood, the settling of the foundation, the patina of old polished stone. It is the love that remains not because it is fiery, but because it is structurally integral. The joke is on those who seek only light and air. Julian and Camille have built something that will last. They will be able to see its precise, imposing outline long after the sun has set. The 7th house is the mirror. Saturn standing before it does not see a lover. He sees the builder and the limits of his own materials. The most lasting marriages are not temples of love, but mutually agreed upon runes, maintained in perpetuity. Chapter 7. The South Node in the 11th, the ghost in the network. And for this, I'll just be referring to the South Node as Ketu. So Ketu is not your past life. It is the back door you left open, the worn groove in the floor your feet find in the dark. It's the skill you mastered so completely you forgot it was a cage. From the Syndicate's ledger of karmic debts unpaid. We have spoken of planets, of houses, of stars that fix fate in fire. Now we must speak of points, of the moon's nodes. Those mathematical ghosts where her path crosses the sun's, the north node, Rahu. South node, Ketu. So Rahu, a frantic blinking arrow pointing toward the clumsy necessary future. Ketu, the deep, warm, suffocating bath of the past, is the place we know too well, the talent we over-rely on, the default setting to which our soul perpetually longs to reboot. Our focus is Ketu in the 11th house, the house of groups, friends, hopes, wishes, and the collective. So Ketu in the 11th house suggests an ancient, effortless proficiency in the realm of the crowd. In a prior iteration, speak metaphorically or don't, we don't care. You were not a face in the throng. You were its temperature, its pulse. You knew how to move within systems to leverage the many, to find your identity reflected and protected in the gleaming surface of the tribe. Your karma is the lingering smell of incense in a crowded temple, the echo of a shared chant. Your curse is the bone-deep knowledge that true safety lies in the plurality. Our patient is Ren, a woman whose Rahu, that gawky destiny, sits in the solitary, self-focused 5th house of Leo, the house of creative risk, personal joy, the unabashed, childlike I. Her destiny is to play, to create for no committee's approval, to stand alone in a spotlight of her own making. It terrifies her, feels like a death sentence. So she lives at her Ketu. Ren is the ultimate networker, a savant of the collective. She runs a community ecosystem consultancy. She speaks in a fluent dialect of synergy, leverage, and coalition building. Her apartment is a landing pad for fringe activists, burnt-out nonprofit directors, and social entrepreneurs pitching apps that gamify empathy. Her calendar is a mosaic of coffee dates, council meetings, and working groups. She has 4,000 close contacts. She has not been truly alone in a decade. Her skill is real. She can walk into a fractured community meeting and within an hour have factions not just communicating but planning a potluck. She knows who to call, who to flatter, who to strategically ignore. Her Ketu talent is a superpower. It is also her ecological niche, perfectly adapted from which she cannot see the sun. The dark humor resides in the exquisite precision of her avoidance. Every foray toward her Ketu is immediately mediated, diluted, and fed back into the 11th house machine. Did she feel a sudden urge to paint, a 5th house impulse? She didn't buy canvases. She founded a collective art praxis workshop, where the group co-creates a single piece based on shared trauma. The urge to perform, she started a storytelling night where everyone gets 7 minutes, ensuring her own voice is just one in a chorus. A desire for romance, she organized a conscious connection group for singles, turning potential intimacy into a facilitated dialogue with talking sticks. Her Ketu is a benevolent, self-replicating prison. The walls are made of friendly faces. The lock is her own belief that to be alone is to be irrelevant, that a joy not witnessed by the tribe is a joy that never happened. The crisis for there is always a crisis. Arrive via a grant, a substantial one, awarded to her consultancy to pilot a model intentional community in a dying small town. Her 11th house zenith. She assembled her dream team, a permaculturist, a conflict resolution specialist, a governance wizard. They held forums, they built consensus. They designed a stunning participatory process for every decision, from land use to conflict resolution to the design of the communal chicken coop. It was a masterpiece of Ketu expression, and it began to fail, slowly, beautifully, like a complex organism rejecting a perfectly matched yet alien organ. The townsfolk, it turned out, didn't want a perfect process. They wanted to bitch about property lines over bad beer. The permaculturist and the governance wizard fell into a silent, ideological Cold War over rainwater catchment rights. The conflict resolution specialist needed conflict resolution. Ren's entire being, her Ketu soul, went into overdrive. More meetings, more facilitated dialogues, more consensus-building exercises. The system strained. The machine choked on the very human mess it was designed to sanitize. The breaking point was the chicken coop. The design, a product of 12 hours of participatory workshops, was brilliant. Ergonomic, sustainable, aesthetically harmonious with both the rustic landscape and the community's avant-garde ideals. It required the group to build it together, a final act of communal unity. On the build day, it rained. Arguments flared over tool allocation, the elegant plans grew muddy, frustration mounted. Ren, trying to facilitate, to soothe, to network the problem away, felt a strange alien sensation rising in her chest. It was a hot, solitary, furious spark. It was the unmediated desire for one thing, one single thing, to be as she alone envisioned it. Ignoring the blueprints, the group, the rain, she picked up a hammer and a pile of reclaimed wood. Without a word of consultation, she walked away from the designated site, away from the arguing tribe, to a corner of the property under a large pine. She began to build, not the collaborative coop, a small, crooked, wildly impractical structure, a castle for chickens. It had a turret. It was lopsided. It was an eyesore. It was entirely, gloriously hers. She worked in a fever of silence. The group fell quiet, watching. The rain soaked her. She didn't care. For the first time in her adult life, she was not building consensus. She was creating, and it was awful, and it was perfect. Ketu in the 11th house teaches us our greatest gift is also our addiction. The tribe will always offer you a role, a consensus, a shared identity. It will save you from the terrifying responsibility of your own unique, possibly ridiculous spark. Ren's destiny was never to build a perfect community. It was to build the lopsided chicken coop, to let the collective gawk or laugh or ignore it entirely. She never finished the model intentional community. The grant money dissolved in facilitation fees and mutual recrimination. The tribe disbanded. But the coop stands. The chickens, she was told, seem to like the turret. Ren is back in the city. She still networks. She still facilitates. The Ketu groove is deep. But sometimes now she says no to a coffee date. She leaves her phone at home. She sits in her apartment alone and does nothing. The silence is terrifying. It is also, she is beginning to suspect, the raw material from which all turrets, crooked or not, are built. The nodes are pull. The south is gravity. The north is the terrifying necessary act of learning to fall upward. The 11th house is the aquarium. The south node there means you were once a very elegant, well-adjusted fish. Your north node demands you to learn to gasp on land, to grow clumsy legs, to build a small, ridiculous sandcastle far from comforting familiar pressure of the deep. And really quick, with her with her Rahu in Leo in the 5th house, really quick, just so you guys can know this. If Rahu is in Leo in your chart, that means that Ketu is in Aquarius. Okay, so in the next video, we'll look at Chapter 8, Chapter 9, and Chapter 10. And I look forward to seeing you there.